Hi, everybody. I hope you're doing okay. I am trying to make our lecture video. I have to tell you, it's been a little bit of a struggle because my internet keeps blinking in and out. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to try and make this video all the way through, but it might have some glitches in it. I won't really know till I'm completely done with the video. And we'll see what we end up at the end. At this point, I really want to get you some information. So that's what's been going on this side of the universe. This week is about team meetings, and in our team meeting assignments that we have, we're talking about team meetings this week and group work and group projects, what makes them functional and dysfunctional. And then you have an assignment for this term where you have 4 team meetings. Those team meetings are basically like our lab work or our recitation for the class, where we're really trying to practice what we're learning to put it into action. And when you open up that assignment, you'll find your name, find out who else is on your team, go to the inbox on Canvas and get a thread going. And whether you're the first person to send the message or you are ready to reply when one comes in from one of your teammates, really try and find a way to be functional in establishing a good communication that's timely and considerate with others. Of course, in the syllabus and in the Start Here module, I outlined the conduct and norms for virtual team meetings and discussions that are inclusive and collaborative. And so this video is really about the team meeting assignment and what we're trying to do in that. And then we're going to be folding in dysfunctional communication or things we need to understand about team and group dynamics as we go along. So this is a communication class, and one of the things we're trying to work on in this class is understanding how to show up in productive ways where we can exercise our full potential, we can allow for others to be included and have overall excellent performance, whatever that is, whatever the goal is for your group. And when we call this class business and professional communication, business provides us the context and the relationship dimensions of either solidarity or the power dynamics of managers, supervisors, subordinates, or coworkers when we're talking about solidarity. Uh, so in those relationship dynamics, that's the context of business. But professional is really trying to lean into this idea of what does it mean to have communication competency in that context. And unfortunately, the word professional historically has not been used always with the best intentions. It's often been used as a code word or a gatekeeping mechanism to include and exclude others. And unfortunately, those lines of inclusion and exclusion have fallen on the line of groups that are traditionally marginalized from business or basically the mobility of financial what's the word I'm trying to think of? Like being able to find financial prosperity or financial mobility to move from one economic level to the other. And that word professionalism is often a big brick wall or a gate keeping out certain groups, whether it's gender, sexuality, race, ability. And these things go on in the way that we've seen certain groups of people excluded from the world of business. So because the world of business is often used this way, it kind of feels like it's a word about exclusivity. It has an element of cultural bias and ethnocentrism to it. And it creates this idea of networks or social worth through who you know. And we often know that how you get a job is often who you knew, has this element of nepotism to it. And because of these things, when we talk about professional in this class, we want to now use the word to talk about ethical communication, which means we are going to now move away from these more dysfunctional ways that the word has been used into a more functional way of how we are seeking to find better workplace situations that are inclusive, that value skill and merit, and we lean into promoting learning and curiosity. And we put emphasis on how people work together, which is about communication. So I want you to kind of, right at the beginning of this video, kind of think about that word professionalism and what are other things we could use instead of professional communication. I wonder if we could think of another word like collaborative communication as an idea. I wonder what your ideas would be to change some of the vocabulary, though I think the word professional can still be of value. And it's one of the reasons why it's still included in the title of this class, because communication competency is a skill. And in uh, even when we're working remotely or we're not in as many social hanging out situations, we still want to find ways to value our the way communication needs to show up and put emphasis on communication as a as as the need for ethics, basically to divide what is right and wrong or good and bad about the way we're talking and including others or excluding others. Okay, so that team assignment is that if it's our lab, then we are going to find lots of different ways of understanding how we show up and becoming self-aware of our own communication style and preferences and becoming aware of others. When the assignment opens up, the assignment has started. As soon as you start reading it, you have started this assignment. A lot of things need to go into the moving parts of it. The very first thing you need to do is see where your name is listed and which team you're on. Whether you're the first person to send out a message on inbox or you're the first person to reply to your team, we need everyone to kind of show up in this way to get the ball rolling. And in that first message, besides a great greeting from everyone, we're going to go right into trying to find a day and time that works. Of course, there's a lot of, you know, apps, scheduling apps that do this for people. But if you're just working with two other people, I think it wouldn't take too many emails back and forth to find common ground, which is why I keep the groups no more than 4 people. Most of it, 3 to 4 people is, I always think the smaller the number of people, the easier it is to find common ground. We have people, you're all working online in this class. So that means that you have family, you have jobs, you might be in different time zones. There's so many different things happening for everybody that I like to keep those teams small so that you can find ways to adapt and include each other. Once you figured out that piece of it. The other part of the assignment is my foundation norms, which you could already start reading in the Start Here module. There's a whole page just on team meetings. And in the syllabus itself, I have some of the conduct for virtual meetings and like my tiny desk presentation here. We need to find ways to adapt ourselves to different audiences. And this one is, it's really strange when making a tiny desk presentation or a little tiny desk lecture for you, because all of you are doing different things. You all need different things in the way information is conveyed, which is why I have podcasts, videos, articles, there's readings. And I do like using YouTube because then I can bookmark the page to adapt it to you. And I think even on YouTube, you could speed me up. I am a slow talker, and sometimes I pause, hit those arrows, or double tap your phone to make me go forward, fast forward. You don't know that you can double tap to go 10 seconds back or 10 seconds forward. I love that. I do that a lot with some of I've watched videos that are some 2 or 3 hours, sometimes 4 hours long on YouTube. So I do a lot of those things to adapt the information better for my listening ear. So I expect you to do the same thing as well, or use those bookmarks to go exactly to where you want. Because this video is mostly about the assignment, I do hope you have a chance to listen to it all, maybe while you're folding laundry if you don't have the patience to sit and watch me. I totally understand. Okay, and there's nothing pivotal happening in the video. You could also just put in your AirPods and go about your day well, listen to me give this little talk if that's a better way for you. Okay. So you will see my norms set up. That's where we're at. Okay, you're going to see my norms set up. And when you're looking at mine, things about extemporaneous, speaking, no reading, things about time and how you're going to manage time. I'll go over that as well as I talk more about functional work, group work. And then there's also the piece about how you will establish norms with your group. So I have my norms, but then the very first thing you do in your team meeting, once you start recording your team meeting, is establish norms. Of course, you want to kind of review some of the main things and how you're going to track time. I'm not looking for just to drill down on time, I'm not looking for a very specific, like every person needs to talk for this amount of time for each one. Everyone has a different speaking style. We want to have room for difference. We also want to make room for conversations or dialogue to happen. If someone makes a certain point, sometimes we might want to add something in there. And I'll talk about turn-taking signals. But the norms are also ways, if you have something specific, like you want to meta-communicate to the group, you want to say something like, oh, I have a tendency to interrupt people because I get really excited and I have an idea. So if I'm doing that, please keep me honest and call me out so I can stay self-aware of that habit I have. That's a great meta-communication statement to establish norms and ways to communicate in the meeting. You might decide on the order. Oh, so this is one of the ways a team established that no other team I'd seen had done this, and they did such a great job. But basically, they would take turns reading the prompts because I have a list of questions you're going to go through in your team meeting, and so they'd say, okay, we're going to go in this order, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the Zoom meeting. And the first person would read the very first prompt. Everyone goes and answers it, 2, 3, 4. But then once they're done with that conversation piece and they're ready to move to the second one, the second person reads the second question, and then they're the first person to answer. And then it goes 3, 4, 1. And then the third person to answer in the original one now becomes the first person to read the prompt, answer it. And I like that because it gave everyone a chance to answer first at least once. And that's one way to compensate for extroverts and introverts in a meeting, because we do notice that the first person out of the gate speaking is often sets the tone and people have a tendency to follow right in line with that idea instead of having a chance for innovative ideas to come in. So that's something to think about. That's just an idea. I'm sure you all establish your own, but they established that during their conversation about norms. And then in meeting 2, 3, and 4, as you go through the term, I'll ask you does anyone want to add a norm? Does anyone want to change anything about the way the meetings are run or try something else? I'll always suggest that at the beginning. Make sure you always go over that. And that's a way that I would say most groups should work that way, that there is some check-in about things to keep it innovative and not get stale, and also change as you learn. as you get to know each other and you learn about yourself and others, there might be things that are more appropriate to do in the group. That's called adaptation. That's called being flexible. That's about getting feedback and becoming better. And if your team meeting is your communication lab for this class, then that's what I'm also gonna be watching them and giving you feedback so that I can help you get better at what you're doing as well. Let's do it here. Let's do it while we're all working together. I have definitely been in my share of dysfunctional meetings, and that usually comes from an organizational atmosphere that's been set up that is dysfunctional and creates competition or adversarial systems that erode trust. And then I've also been in situations where it was really just a one person in the meeting that was, or a couple people in the meeting who were not aware of their communication style, and it was creating kind of a sabotage for creativity and really innovative group work, which is the highest potential. That's one of the reasons why we're aiming for this collaborative process to really move into innovation in how we listen to each other. Those of you who are reading Smart Brevity and the listening book, I really feel like as you listen to this lecture, to really think about how those books actually fit. Actually, I'm thinking now of also Atomic Habits, and I'm thinking about the Gathering book. Uh, all those books and the Machiavellian for Women, all those books are going to really talk about how you show up and how do you communicate with others so that you can have agency and a voice. And then how are you showing up as a listener for others? Okay, let's see, what else are we looking at? Okay, so there's metacommunication norms. There's also implicit communication and explicit communication. Those are words I'd like to hear you using a little more. So implicit is anything that is shared meaning that doesn't need to be said out loud anymore. It's almost invisible rules about the conduct, how we greet each other, how we talk, turn-taking signals. That would be implicit. And this is why kids or people who are new spend more time on process and rules and establishing norms because they're making things explicit uh, from the implicit to the explicit. And kids growing up in a society, in kindergarten, we're getting a lot more rules of how to be in a classroom. By the time you get to college, it's not like anyone's telling you to stay in your seat or raise your hand if you have a question. You have been enculturated into the academic culture from years and years of growing up in the education system that you don't need those explicit rules anymore. They turned into implicit rules. So explicit rules are when we literally say the rule out loud, and things that are new, like if we're new to a job, we're going to have a lot more explicit rules. If we are new to a relationship or a roommate situation, we're going to have a lot more explicit rules. Oh, and we may not even know there's a rule until it gets broken. So rules that get broken, we have to turn back into explicit rules and make them more uh, negotiate the meaning of them again so that we can be more inclusive for things that we didn't realize we had an expectation for until the rule was broken. I think phones are a really good example of things that have a lot of explicit rules in our culture, especially if anyone in my audience here was there when people really started having a lot more phones and cameras available. You started seeing a lot more signs, when to have your phone on, when to turn your phone off. I definitely, when I was in the classrooms in the 2006 and on, there was so much more strictness about phones than I am now, either as a student or as an instructor. Now I barely hear anything, and there's And that means it's turning more into an implicit, and then in places where you'll hear different contexts where the rules will show up again, like in hospitals or on airplanes kind of thing. All right. Other things about communication is turn-taking signals. And this is one of the norms I often hear people talk about because, boy, it's hard on Zoom. We don't know if we are frozen, someone else is frozen, maybe our feed is coming in at a different speed than someone else's. And that's why it often feels like we're interrupting each other in a conversation, or why pauses sometimes seem longer because we're like, is it my turn to talk? Is it your turn to talk? Whose turn is it to talk? So we're still, as Zoom is new, we still have a lot of need for some explicit meta communication around turn-taking signals. And that's why there are things like the reactions in different emojis, or things that, or the chat where you can throw things into the chat. Or you write, some of my teams establish the order of responding. You can also, there's a way or to order the, because I'd like you to turn in your team meetings into gallery mode. I don't want them in speaker mode because I want to see every single screen, because how you're listening is just as important as when you're talking. So make sure all your recordings are done in gallery mode. And then what I was going to say is that you can order your, whoever is the host can order the gallery and freeze it so it always stays in the same order for everybody, because everyone's looking at it a little bit differently. I know, so there is a way to do that. You can Google that, or find a YouTube that might explain how to do it. When we're in a dialogue, a dyad with someone in person, culturally turn-taking signals has been mostly divided into two different types of groups. There's the overlap group, or a pause. My turn to talk, your turn to talk, my turn to talk. And that pause in between, depending on your culture, will be shorter or longer. And that usually is because of power dynamics. If you're talking with someone with more power, you'll hear more pauses from the person without power before they talk, or some verbal or nonverbal signal that it's their turn that's more explicit. Where in overlap culture, how you jump in is with volume. And so people will not, this is very unconscious that we're doing this, but we will often use volume go down, even though we're still talking, we might lower our volume or use more vocal ums and ahs, and then that signals the other person to jump in with their thought at a higher volume. But if this person is talking and this person jumps in and they're not ready, in person, they'll use volume and tap them out. And then if they want to come in, the volume just starts increasing. And because of the overlap and of people talking over each other, to the observer, it often feels like you're watching an argument or a fight, of conflict of some type. But it might not actually be that. It might, if they're both from the same culture group and they're used to that style together, they might just be building ideas and getting energized from that process. This is one of the things we had to adapt to in business communication in Zoom, that if there were a team that worked really well in person with this kind of overlap dynamics and built ideas and got da 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 da, and that was their style, they got on Zoom and they couldn't really do that in the same way anymore. Conversations became stilted and they seem to have lost energy. That becomes really difficult, a type of adaptation. So like I said, we're still trying to figure out this virtual meeting situation. And I think the more you lean into establishing those norms, the better you're going to be at finding ways to adapt to a different modality or platform like this one here. Another norm is this idea of dialogue instead of monologue. Now, as I said before, I've definitely been in meetings where there was a lot of monologuing happening, or the conversation of overlap was just between a couple people. And the rest of us were sitting around going, "I wonder if they even care," my idea. Where they probably do want more, but because some people have different communication styles, if you don't set up a norm where you do check-ins and move through the room, or create autonomy or spaces where people can think about their ideas before or after the meeting and still add to the dialogue. Those are norms that need to be established in an explicit way. Unfortunately, we do have some bad actors, or sometimes by Will Phelps, his bad apple theory, where we have people who are not in a place, they're either intentionally sabotaging the situation, and meaning that they are creating deviant behaviors like more authoritarian style or Machiavellian or narcissist kind of styles in the way that they're communicating, that are using others. When we see deviant or bad actor behavior, it's really that they're using others as kind of ways to amplify and themselves, or create uh, ways to make them to give themselves the spotlight. I think that's kind of, or use others for their own promotion kind of thing. And that's when we see like a kind of dysfunctional, toxic situation going on. The Will Phelps and the bad apple theory, this is bad apples in a very specific theory, not the common vernacular way we hear bad apples used. Unfortunately, that term often gets used as a way to dismiss a problem in an organization, to say, oh, that was just that one person that was the problem. It's not the organizations that's the problem, where we always want to go back to an evaluation of the organization as a whole if there's something really dysfunctional going on in a hostile workplace kind of atmosphere. Will Phelps' bad apple, I want to focus on group dynamics and group communication, that his three bad apples are the withholder, the deviant, or the negative. Basically, someone who is a jerk, a slacker, or a pessimist. So the withholder is someone who just isn't participating. They're someone who's not pulling their weight. They're neutral, they're apathetic, they really don't have any opinion. And there's something about the energy of that we see it becomes a contagion. And it starts contaminating the function or productivity of other people in the group. Someone who is just being a jerk or about the situation, they're very critical. They're always complaining. They're very contemptuous, like they correct other people's behavior or say what they got wrong in ways that are very critical of the person, or something that is connected to that person's identity in some way. It has a kind of pointed attack to it. And they very rarely say anything positive or affirms any affirmative statements. And when they do questioning, it's not questioning to build an idea up to make it stronger. It's questioning in a way to poke holes in it, to dismiss it, to try and diminish the credibility of the idea or whatever it is that's being criticized. And because of that, this person can sometimes come apart as having a lot of energy or extroversion in a meeting, and they can often dominate the meeting and in a way, and that's how they become that's how they're sabotaging the group work, is because of their extroversion and critical style. People start getting more and more introverted and less willing to take risks or make mistakes or try out an idea, all of these things. So we lose trust and camaraderie in those type of groups because of this kind of extrovert style, critical style that they bring. And the last one is the pessimist. And the pessimist is usually really dominant in nonverbals, that they're doing things non-verbally that are very like, like sighing or they might even literally put their head down or do behaviors that are so overt and they're non-responsive. They're like, mm. Different than the slacker. The slacker is still responsible. They're just be like, yeah, I don't know. I'll just do whatever the group says. Yeah, no problem. But then they don't really follow through in their support of any ideas. They're just the apathy. The pessimist is not only just constantly negative, the glass is half full. There's kind of this cloudiness, no silver linings. We might as well give up hope. What's the purpose of this? Uh, as opposed to just being kind of neutral. Um, and because it's almost completely based in nonverbals, I'd be curious what you think that looks like on a Zoom call if they are completely always on mute. Maybe they don't even have their camera on, or if they do, they're backlit. So you can't even see their face. They're just this silhouette. Or they tilt their camera. Here, I'm going to tilt my computer up. Maybe they'll just tilt their camera up. Yeah, I made it to the meeting barely. Like there's just like, or they will put themselves in some awkward position that makes it really uncomfortable to keep looking at them. They're not framed up right. And when we talk about being professional in over Zoom, we want to consider how we're presenting ourselves in a way that does not negatively affect the group dynamics so that we can move into full potential and performance, productivity, excellent performance and productivity. All right, so these are some of the problems, right? These are some of the problems, and you've probably been in group assignments and or in place situations. I'd love to hear some of your examples of how this shows up for you. When we talk about collaboration as the place we're going, we're really talking about collaboration is a type of conflict. It means that we are going to lean into differences. We're curious about other perspectives. And that's why we use the word team. Team is a specific word we're using to say that we want people on our team that bring their expertise, that bring different opinions, bring different backgrounds. And because when we have those differences and we're allowing room for risk or new ideas or trying things differently, we're actually moving into the real way the word team should be used. Just like a baseball team, right? If a baseball team, I have a pitcher and then I have everyone in all these different positions, each one has a different skill set. If I just had a team of pitchers or a team of people who know how to do first base, or I want everyone to have the same skills as me, I'm not going to have a very strong baseball team. I need people with different skill sets, and I want people from who've worked with others or know different ways to do do the game, so then we can move into really being the best team we can be. Same is true in group work. The really good group work in academic group work that I've had to do for classes, the very first thing we do is say, hey, I'm good at presentations. I'm good at creating PowerPoints. I'm really good at, and we figure out who we are on our team. We spend time establishing identity and norms, and then we can move into, all right, what is our goal? So I know who we are. What's our goal? Now we're on the same team, and the conflict is the problem-solving discussions and managing time or things that are unexpected or technical difficulties to get to our goal, and how are we supporting each other. When we do that, that's the true meaning of win-win. conflict. Win-win conflict says we have the same problem, we have the same goal, and we're going to work together to move through that. And we're going to lean into what we can each bring to it. Sometimes I've been in group work where they've had so many experiences of mistrust, or there's this competition with grades and adversarial system of that grade setup that we feel like we can't trust each other. You'll often find one person in a group work, maybe that's been you, where you're like, everyone just step aside. I'm going to do this and I'll just put your names on it. Just leave me alone. I always get A's and I need an A. So leave me alone, right? And this is one of the reasons why I lean away from doing that type of group work where one person ends up doing the work for everybody else. Because in this class, I really want to lean into the communication process and move us into a real team situation. That idea of win-win came from Morton Deutsch, who's considered the father of modern conflict. And to really understand what collaboration is to understand how the pureness of us all being on the same team with the same goal. When I teach conflict communication, which some of you might be in that class right now or have taken that class from me, that what we're trying to do is figure out all the tools in our toolbox to have these dialogues to move us into this win-win pure conflict that Martin Deutsch kind of set up for us, though we have a lot more people that are working on it now, from Charles Feltman, Brené Brown, Esther Perel, and many others. In fact, we have we have several of our books that go into it this term as well in this class. All right. So let me just talk a bit about that idea of collaboration versus competition, which is what we mostly have seen for examples for us, or the environments we are in are often set up competitively. When we talk about really great teams, we're really looking that teams have developed leadership within the team. Even if you might have a person kind of as a project manager, or you might have someone in a decision-making role, because we ultimately need to keep moving forward, which means you need someone in charge of making the absolute decision or the norm of consensus only, that leadership that's happening from within the team is really that we are showing up in a way that promotes people's contributions. And there's this feeling of accountability, and feedback is framed in a way that we all need to be better together. And we will talk about feedback in a week coming up here soon. So competition is more adversarial. It's a win-lose dynamic. And in competition, because it's pretty much in almost all of our entertainment, from Cupcake Wars to Bachelor Nation and Love to sports, all of these different things that we enjoy, the competition and adversarial elements of it, that we need to become aware of how it's trickling down into our interpersonal encounters, and when is it becoming dysfunctional. We definitely want to say that there is an element of competition that it can be functional when it is used when competition is used in a way to make performance better and have gamify. We sometimes gamify things that we need to do. Like maybe when you go to work out with some friends, maybe you gamify your workout in this competitive way so that all of you can be better together. Or my sister and I used to gamify cleaning our room because we hated it so much, and we compete to see who could clean up their room the fastest to our favorite vinyl record. We'd put it on and play the 4 songs and see who could finish first, right? Like so that's kind of like a gamifying and how competition can be used to help us all get through something. When it becomes dysfunctional is when we are leaning into the hierarchies of win-lose and we start using criticism, contempt, or aggression, direct aggression, which I'm going to be directly critical or contemptuous, or indirect aggression, meaning I'm going to send my messages of how unpleased I am with your performance through another channel. Like I'm going to do inner office gossip, or I'm going to uh, accidentally send out something on the chat. Oops, I didn't mean to send that out. Passive aggressive is when I'm going to deny the intention of the message was to harm. Oh, I'm sorry, you can't take a joke. You should get better at taking jokes, right? Whatever it is, right? So these direct, indirect, or passive aggressive ways often bubble up from the muck of competition when it's becoming dysfunctional. Another thing we have to become aware is compromise and understand compromise a little better. So compromise is when I have an idea, someone else has an idea, and we choose the third idea. And so this is called lose-lose because nobody gets what they want when you're doing true compromise. And I like to highlight this because our culture says compromise is the holy grail of how to deal with conflict. You know how I make my marriage work? I just compromise, or how my team is the best. It's through compromise. Where what we see over time is that compromise actually erodes trust. And because it erodes trust because of the way that everyone loses every single time. So just like competition, sometimes compromise can be useful. It can be a tool that you can use. And really the only way compromise is really useful is when you're up against a deadline and time is of the essence. And that's why our monochronic culture that sees time as a scarce resource really pushes collaboration as the ultimate choice. It's really a choice about time. But if you are establishing your group dynamics correctly, where you really do that norming and storming piece to it, when you're getting into performing, you don't need to lean into compromise as the only choice to get through a conflict, that the collaboration is transforming conflict into this performing piece. So compromise can be helpful because of the element of time, but when it's dysfunctional, all you're left is with a group of people who are counting up their losses. So what happens, and this is where group workplace situations become really sometimes gross places to work, really cliquey with inner office cliques and inner office gossip, is often because of the way compromise is always to use as the way to deal with conflict. And so, I'm just tired of no one listening to me or using my idea. I'm going to go over to my buddies over here who actually agree with me, and I'm going to go make my point privately or public privately in the copy room. I'm going to say, like, can you believe that meeting we were in? There they went again, just monologuing, and they got their way and took over the meeting, and there was no way for anyone to come up with any other ideas, right? Uh, these kind of little alliances start showing up. So then when you get back to the next project and we need innovation and creativity, we've eroded so much trust in that workplace that no one is willing to take any risks and show up anymore, just like with our dysfunctional leadership or deviant leadership styles. So one way is that, let's say you're a manager of a group or a supervisor, and you had to go into a compromise situation to get the client their deliverables on time. The next time you come back to the office or the next time you're in a meeting, you should do what's called a postmortem, which in Creativity Inc., Pixar, the story of Pixar, Ed Catmull and Amy Wallace talk about the importance of postmortems. And postmortems are when you ask people to say what was working and what was not working. And if you've developed good norms and team dynamics, even if one project didn't go well, it shouldn't knock everything out if you're willing to move into a problem-solving mode to do better on the next team. And one of the things in creativity, they say you need the good things to celebrate what went well as well. We need to highlight that, but then we also need to go over what we could do better and lean into that. But if people just go into attack mode and say, well, if it weren't for so-and-so because they're such a slacker, right? That's a critical personality attack. And it should stay on task or process and not get into personality attacks if we want to try and attempt to save a group and move back into functional communication. All right, I am going to go as we come to the end of this lecture. We're doing really well this time. I have a lot of pages open. Let me get to our business class Canvas page. I just want to make sure. I feel like I covered everything I wanted to for this week and the team meetings. Okay, so I guess that's what I still want to cover. I want to cover just a little bit more about the team meetings as I wrap up here for the assignment. I talked about in the assignment how you're going to communicate with each other to set up a synchronized time to conduct the meetings. And then once you're in the meeting, you might take part of the conversation to establish a plan since you know when the next assignments will open up. That can be really helpful. And then one of the things I want to highlight about the meeting is that usually there's a questions in the meeting, at least one, if not two questions that are asking you to do some type of problem solving. Like the first one, I might ask you to come up with a team name for your team. And that is really a chance for you to do that work before you go into the meeting to think of some ideas so you can present them to others. And then just I'm going to be listening to the conversation and how you are responding to each other and including other people in the conversation and then deciding on the name. How will you come to that agreement? And sometimes I will put up a video that you have to watch before class and then come up with your own ideas about that video and what vocabulary stood out to you. One of the things I really want to avoid is falling into groupthink in a meeting. So if the first person who goes on the video says, "Oh, I thought of vocabulary words A and B," and then the next person who stops says, "Oh, I thought of A and B too," and then the next person says A and B, and the next person says A and B, and we didn't really get any difference or diversity. To me, that might be a signal. Not that you won't come up with the same ideas, but there's a lot of ways that you can diversify your answers and come up with different ideas and your own perspective. So make sure you do that work before you go into the meeting. So that's another tip. All right. I really love the team meeting assignment. I get a lot of positive feedback. Some of you have done this assignment with me before. I see you out there. And if you're someone who has been in my class before and done team meetings, I hope that you take the opportunity in the first meeting to make sure you share that and share how the assignment went for you so that For people who are new to it, you can remember how you felt when you're new at it. I'm throwing you into a group people you've never met before. That always creates a minimal level of anxiety for some people. And then, of course, because a grade is based on it and you're dependent on that, we're interdependent on other people, that creates a little bit of anxiety. But if everybody shows up for it with the best intentions and really doing the work behind the intention, it should work out just fine. I very rarely have problems with this assignment, so I'm looking forward to this term and seeing what you all come up with. Okay, have a great evening, as it's evening while I'm recording, or a great day if you're watching this at that time. I'll talk to